All right. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all having a great first day at Con. Welcome to Why We Tell Stories. This panel was kind of put on a bit last minute. I got asked not too long ago if I could host one more panel. So it's not as prepared as I would like it to be. I don't have any visuals to show. A little bit on the vision of what I'd like this panel to become in the future, because it's something I would like to host multiple times. I'd love for this to be an opportunity for us creators of whatever medium, whether we're artists or writers or dancers, anything we use to express ourselves and tell stories. I want this to be a place where we can get together and talk to each other and be able to bounce our ideas off of each other. In the future, I'd love to be able to have a panel of guests talk about their own experience, and even have the audience voice up and tell me what they think, what their experience is with this. So to begin, we'll do some introductions. I'm Blue. I'm of Blue Wolf Studios, and I'm an animator. I like to tell stories through animation. I'd like to ask around the room if anyone else would like to say what kind of artistic medium they like to use, how they like to tell stories.
Yes.
Yeah.
My name is Damien, and I am an artist. I hope that one day I can become a comic artist.
All right.
I do just like junk journaling, so I just put a bunch of stuff together that's in my brain, and it turned out to be really pretty.
Yeah, that's great.
Hey, I'm Cosmo. I do a lot of illustrations. I definitely want to make like these really cool space stories one day through comics or just illustration.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. Yes.
I used to write a lot, and now since I have less time on my hands, I just write story prompts for people and just say, start out here, have fun.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to join in? There's honestly so many different ways that we can all tell stories. It's not just through art or writing or animation. Someone on Twitter suggested dancing as a great form of storytelling, and I hadn't even thought of it before. But I think it's interesting to see that no matter what way we kind of interpret the ideas that come to our head, we all express these ideas in different ways. So the way I'd like to run this panel is to bring up some questions, give my own experience on it as an animator and my way of telling stories, and kind of ask around the room what your interpretation of telling stories is, and to see where we differ and where we connect. Because I think telling stories really does come from a deeper kind of subconscious place, and we tap into this and express it in whatever way we can. We tap into the void. We go into something that is not tangible, and we make it tangible in our own way. And the way we do this is so unique to us. And not only is it unique to us and our view of the world, but somehow it's able to reach out and connect to other people, and I think it's powerful. And I really think it's important to talk about this and to share it, especially because we all interpret it our own way. So, to kind of start things off, where do just ideas in general come from, or where do your ideas come from? For myself, my ideas, I think like I was saying before, you just kind of tap into the void, you tap into nothingness, kind of feel something and let it come out. Oftentimes I will listen to, music, sort of visualize something in my head, almost like in Ratatouille with Remy biting into the food. And somehow, whatever emotions I'm feeling in the moment become a tangible visual sensation in my mind. Or this is a dog who likes to paint, and it becomes its own story. Sometimes the ideas come from, an emotional standpoint, not usually an intellectual standpoint. And it's either current emotions or something that has been suppressed and is now resurfacing as an idea. I'd like to ask around the room for anyone else, where do you think your own ideas come from?
A lot of the tone for it I like to take from like the media I look into, like shows I watch, music I listen to, but the story itself I like to take from like the emotions that I personally feel throughout life and people I know and things like that. So I think, you know, different parts of it come together from different things in my life.
Yeah. Yes.
For me, it's always largely depended on almost what I'm in the mood to write. Sometimes it's something just pops into my head while I'm listening to some music or I've seen something, and I will let my mind just wander and follow that through. Other times I would use writing as a way to process something that I'm not quite able to do for myself on my own, so I will put a character through it and they can figure it out.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's what I like to do with the animations, where sometimes it's not always like, oh, this is my experience and I'm trying to express a character through my own experience. Sometimes it's like, here's this character, what if I threw them into this situation that was emotionally hard for them, and how would they overcome the challenges? But it's still coming from a place of my own emotional interpretation, even though it is, here is a separate character that is not me, but somehow is still interpreting the world around them through how I would like them to complete the journey, or if I were in their steps and it's like, this is where I would like to emotionally resolve the situation. Yep.
Dreams. A lot of times I like get inspiration from dreams I have and then like tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because even dreams kind of come from a subconscious sort of place. So to kind of bring something that was, it's so interesting because it's, your brain has now made it a tangible idea in your head, and then you're able to interpret it and put it out into the real world. Yeah, so we've kind of discussed like where our ideas come from. What typically drives your stories? What drives you to create? For myself, sometimes it's just a natural part of me. I think that for a lot of people, becoming a storyteller is a natural thing. Humans have told stories for centuries. We've always, since making paintings on cave walls, we've always told stories. I find telling stories to be a very therapeutic tool and a way of being able to express your emotions and express things that you can't quite interpret yourself in the moment. Being able to put your own emotions into situations that you may not be comfortable doing in the moment. I think this can be a real thing for not only storytelling devices like art and writing, but even in things like D&D or role-playing games, where it's like you are able to create a character to represent yourself and have it go through this emotional journey without you having to put yourself in harm's way. And I think it's very therapeutic to be able to experience things without actually having to be there. I'd like to ask anyone else, like, what drives you to create, and what drives you to keep telling stories?
A lot of the time it's like when I'm just trying to like make someone else feel an emotion or point of view that I can't really put into words, and then I don't know, I just feel like that helps people understand each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I feel like it's a good way to get across like the things you feel or things you experience or things you care about to other people, but I also think it's a really helpful way to make your way through things you want to figure out yourself, and I think both of those are really valuable and really good motivations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. I completely agree. Sometimes you need a space that you can create and that you have a little bit more control over in terms of the environment and the external factors. For me, sometimes it's just boredom, and I need to fill that mental void, and creating does that.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid reason to create, is like just to fill the time. In the back?
I think that we do it because we're growing, and it's a process. Our entire life, we have to work over things that we experience. So, you know, it's a brief and very, you know, you use concise words to describe, you know, what you thought, what you seen, you know.
Yeah, I think growth is definitely a great driving factor. I mean, if there's anything that's constant in the world, it is change and growth. And I think being able to continue to tell stories only helps you grow more. It helps you interpret the world more. Yes.
I mean, it is, you know, at the end of the day, work. It's good work.
Mhm.
It's kind of hard to sit down and do, but it also feels really good to actually like sit down and do it. I almost never have like a problem doing something creative once I get there,
Mhm.
but the getting there is the hardest part. Sometimes it's just a matter of like getting really motivated, getting really energized about it. And sometimes it's just like, okay, I hate the idea of doing this. I'm gonna sit down and be creative out of spite.
Yes.
I think it's like a nice way to have some control over your environment. You know, it's cool to make art to decorate your space, especially since we've been spending a lot of time in our spaces lately.
Yeah.
And like the way that you collect art and organize it together is kind of its own art form, which is like a nice motivation. Like you're kind of representing yourself in the way that you put together art.
Yeah, that's a really interesting interpretation. Just because, you know, control is an illusion. Like, we truly don't have control over our lives. So to be able to create stories where you have the control to create the world you want to be in, or create the world you want your characters to be in, is really interesting.
So the one thing I do like as like a consumer of stories is like just having this, you introduce this character and they have all of these flaws. Perhaps like as the writer you can make them the flaws that you see in yourself and then use this as a way to like watch this character grow to like overcome these flaws, almost as a way for you to like reconcile with like the old flaws that you have.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, even as consumers of stories, or even just as creators, seeing that you've made a connection.
That's awesome.
We're looking for a fourth. Has anyone seen one?
Good story right there.
Yeah. But yeah, just to show that it's like you've made a connection with someone else, and that someone else feels the same thing that you may feel, and validating your own feelings. Sort of losing the train of thought. I mean, it's a powerful device of being able to, you know, connect with others and kind of validate your feelings because a character went through it, or you felt the same emotional journey that in any kind of storytelling. I guess since we kind of brought it up, what do you do to create a inspirational environment? You know, what creates inspiration for you? I find for myself, I get the most like creative mileage and great storytelling when I schedule time to be creative. At least for just to get things done, to get my brain moving forward. And I think that's the key, is that the best way to keep moving in your storytelling is to find ways to keep your brain moving forward. So sometimes mindless activities like going for a walk keeps you moving forward, and you get put into this space in your mind of being able to tap into that void and being able to pull an idea out and make it tangible. And so finding times to scheduling your own time to create, finding time for mindless activities. I find that sometimes I get my best ideas if I just grab a pen and I start scribbling on paper, and all of a sudden I've created this character, and I'm like, their story is going to be this. So I'd like to ask what anyone else does to kind of create a inspirational environment for themselves and find ways to get yourself in the storytelling mood. Yeah.
Yes. At the end of the day, before going to bed, I like to make like sketches of characters expressing like different emotions that I've felt throughout the day, and often they're more complex than just feeling happy or sad. They're like maybe they are disappointed that they lost something. And then I would maybe create a story on how they lost something and how they would move forward.
Yeah, I think that's great, because not only are you know, finding the time to practice character expression, but it's very specific to, you know, the emotions you were feeling, and it's the more complex kind of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, a complex emotion tells a story. Yes?
A lot of the time, it depends on my environment. I like going out into nature and like the forest and stuff, and then just walking around and like looking at different stuff and what I notice, the feelings it gives me. It's like I try to translate that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always found nature to be a powerful tool for putting your own mind at ease and being able to tap into something deeper than yourself.
I like to talk to friends and other people who are close about like ideas that I have for what I want to make, and then I sit down at my tablet and I put on the same song on loop for the entire time I'm drawing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, because that'll be another talking point in the panel, is being able to collaborate or bounce ideas off of others.
Others, music, like a huge inspiration. Just
Mhm.
hearing songs or different like types of music. You know, at least my mind starts generating images and ideas like with that music, and I can
Mhm.
get really inspired from just different varieties of music.
Yeah, I think with my own experience with music being a source of inspiration, oftentimes I would listen to my dad play his piano, run into the other room saying, like, I have an idea for that. And I think it's really interesting because my dad and I are like two sides of the same coin. We're on the same wavelength. So he'll be saying, it's like, oh, I was playing this thing as this kind of emotion. I was like, I was feeling that, and here's my interpretation of something that could build from that. So it's really interesting that not only can storytelling be from one medium, but can almost translate to another, and being able to collaborate with each other. A lot of my own animations actually use my dad's music because I've found a lot of inspiration, and I find that I can pick up on the emotions he was putting into there. And I feel like it's not something too many people have thought about, but music as a storytelling medium can be a very powerful tool. I don't know how often people think of music as a storytelling device, but I'd love to have more musicians kind of chime in and talk about their own experience of what is the emotional journey of trying to make their music and make their songs.
I feel like there's like so many songs where it's like they're actually saying stuff that's like really deep, and like they're like telling their like life experiences and stuff, but like people don't really listen because it's catchy. They just like listen to the beat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to know, as a creator and as a consumer of any kind of storytelling device, as a storyteller, do you know the emotional depth of your story while you're writing it? Or are you just saying it's like, well, this is just a story about a character doing a thing? Because oftentimes maybe a consumer only sees the surface level of what you were trying to do, or maybe they see something deeper that you didn't even intend. I often find that if I look back on a story, it was like, well, this was just a silly story about like a dog being a friend with a bird. And I was like, well, it was actually a really kind of beautiful story about friendship and loss and being able to let go. And it's not something I always see right away. And I think it's just really interesting in storytelling. Sometimes you are tapping into something deeper that you don't even think about in the moment. And this is probably where a lot of times people will find connections with your own stories, because they will see that deeper connection that maybe you don't even see and be able to relate to it. And I think, stories are powerful. It's saved a lot of people. And so I think it's important to keep telling stories. So speaking of being able to collaborate with other people, as a storyteller, do you often work on your own, or do you work on a team, or do you find it easier to create when you are able to bounce ideas off of other people? I think, like I mentioned before, I get a lot of inspiration from my dad playing his piano, and being able to bounce my ideas off of him, see what his interpretation of what he was doing, and tell him my own interpretation, and somehow finding a happy balance between the two. I often find I'm the most creative when I can actually bounce my ideas off of friends. They have no part in my own creative process, but being able to say my ideas to them and having them say their ideas back just creates this like energetic bubble of being able to push an idea, more and more to life. So I'd like to know if anyone else, do you tend to work alone and just try and tap into your own deeper self when telling stories, or do you work with others and try and create a more collaborative setting for your stories?
I think it really depends on the mood at the time, but I think something really valuable, like when you talk to someone about your ideas and stuff like that, it's really valuable when they give you their own feedback and like what they think and what they want to add, but I think it's just as valuable being able to say what you're thinking out loud to someone else. I think that's just as important, or more so, than what they have to say too. It's nice to have someone to listen, because you can also listen to yourself when you put your ideas out there.
Yeah.
For me, it largely depends on what I'm writing. If I'm working on a book, it's very much a personal thing, because I've created these characters, I've grown attached to them, I disagree with them, so it is very deeply personal, and it's not something I want anyone to see until I'm ready. But on the other hand, when I'm doing just my little, role-playing starters, those are very much designed to be collaborative, where I go, here's 5, sentences to set a scene, have fun. And so that's very much a collaborative effort, and it's always really interesting to see the difference between a one-on-one collaboration versus, my sending it out to 5 people and just kind of watching it happen. So it's always, it largely depends on what I'm writing.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, where sometimes you don't always share your stories right away because they are coming from a very vulnerable place. And the thing about vulnerability is sometimes you don't share it until you're ready. So I think oftentimes we'll create a lot of stories on our own until we're ready to share it with other people and kind of let ourselves be vulnerable.
So I'm kind of like the opposite. Like I like showing people, like I like getting a bunch of people to read something like as I'm writing it, and it's really like fascinating because sometimes like you'll see something only like one way, and then like 5 people will tell you like 5 different things that you didn't notice, and you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because we've got to be open to sharing the stories. I think that's why we're all storytellers. Is we make stories so that we can share them. It's not right to keep them hidden away, and it's even something I have to learn to do, is to share kind of the raw ideas, because even though they are meaty and they're vulnerable, it's probably important to share them anyway.
There's an interesting concept that I think could be relevant and useful here from actually the world of software development.
Mm-hmm.
It's this concept called rubber duck debugging. The idea is you have a little rubber duck sitting next to you, and when you're running into a problem, you can't figure out what's going on. And this could be very useful for the creative process for folks who maybe don't feel comfortable sharing yet with other folks, is you just explain the problem to this rubber duck. And oftentimes along the way of starting from the beginning and moving forward and explaining the whole situation, you're like, okay, there's the missing part, there's the missing point. Is there a fire alarm or something going on? Like, concerning.
So, something I'm always interested in when people create a lot of stories is if they draw from a certain culture to tell their stories. Because I know, at least for myself, I don't have any strong connections to any heritage or family trees. So being able to draw upon, my own, culture and family doesn't quite make its way into my own storytelling. I find that we tend to create our own cultures, and mine has very much been a living in my own kind of emotional state for storytelling, and being able to draw from that and trying to change my own behaviors through observation and experience. But I'm always interested because I can see that being able to draw upon certain cultures of your own history can be very important for people's storytelling and how it influences you and makes your own self and your story stronger. So I'm always curious to know what kind of culture, or if you do or don't, what do you draw from to create your stories?
What is it? So I listen to a lot of hip hop and stuff, and I'm really interested in like African American culture. Like that's something I've tried to get in touch with, and it's just like really interesting because I mean like I like analyzing songs and stuff and listening to them with other people, and usually like any song, if you like take it as like a poem and like listen to it, it's like a lot more complex than people realize. And so I'm like really fascinated by like how you can hide so much like complexity in something that seems simple.
I think that's really interesting.
I don't actually get to draw from my own cultural background that much, with my mom being Filipino and Chinese, but I think something really important about being able to draw from your own culture and your background, your family history and everything like that, is that you can get your experiences of that to people who are not familiar with it, and you can also get to people who are familiar with it, so people who, can connect with that in a very personal way that people who are not in the same culture cannot exactly get, but it also gives another window for people to be able to understand some things that they wouldn't have been able to without an insight into it.
Yeah, because I think one of the important things when it comes to drawing upon, a family heritage of your culture is being able to represent yourself on the page or the screen or in music. It's just important. I think, there's so history written by the winners. There's so little representation of other people, from gender, sexuality, or race, that it is important that we do amplify these stories. There's not much I can do myself of just being white, of being able to draw upon this culture. But I think as storytellers, it's great to amplify the voices and being able to share the experiences, because at the end of the day, the stories are all going to come from the same emotional place, and it's something that everyone will be able to relate to. I think an interesting thing about storytelling and being able to tap into your own emotions is it brings up the question of, do you know your own feelings? I think we've kind of talked a bit earlier about how sometimes when creating your stories, you might find out later on that it's a deeper story than what you intended in the first place. Everything has more of a meaning to it, and there's more layers to your story. So it brings up the question of, do you truly know your own feelings? You may not always know the what or the why of what you're feeling, because we are only just experiencing the world. So being able to create your stories validates your feelings and is putting them into a tangible space where you say, I understand what this is now. So I'd like to know for anyone else their thoughts on, if you know your own feelings going into something, is this something where you are creating stories based on what you are feeling in the moment? Are you just creating a story and realizing that you are bringing up something of your own past and your own past feelings, and you're being able to resolve the thing that you went through?
That one, it's nice and hands-on. I'm verbalizing this. I think the emotional intelligence required to consciously understand the full depth of what you're expressing through your story is something to strive for. I know I certainly don't have it, and it takes retrospection and to look back on stories and go, aha, figured it out now, 3 years later, but okay. And I think it's a good thing to question yourself in what you're writing. It's whatever you're creating. When there is so much emotion attached to it, it's a, where is this coming from? Can this be expressed differently? And why is it coming out like this? Those are kind of things that I've asked myself, because I'll be honest, there was a time I was having a rough time of life, and I made my characters' lives very, very difficult in ways that, I wouldn't wish upon anyone. But it was interesting to me to look back on that and understand that that's why they had struggled, was because I was still working through my own thing. But like I said, I think it takes time to be able to fully understand our emotions in what we create.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I find that this is probably, it creates a very important reason as to why we should create and why we should tell stories. We live in this world that's full of so much noise and distraction, and we don't really take the time to be with ourselves. So I find that creating stories creates that space of being able to be with yourself, whether you realize it or not. Perhaps later on down the line you realize, like, oh, this was about me and the thing I was going through, and you were able to create characters or create a story that got you to a conclusion, and being able to live out those feelings and figure out what they were and how you resolve them.
I think something really interesting about the point where you put yourself into a story you make and then reflect on it later and figure out what that means is and one example with me, one of my ex-partners, we made 2 games, except the second game ended up not being finished because in the middle of it we had to follow through. And it turns out that game the entire thing was centered around communication and trust in one another. And it turns out, looking back on it, it was basically us working through something that we did not actually have a handle on. So I think it's really interesting to see what kind of things you'll figure out later on after something's already been written and done. I think that's something interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
I guess how I feel is, I'm not sure how other people feel the same, but the way I feel is like characters I've created are I feel like always extensions of myself or aspects of myself. In a way, things that emotions or feelings or ideas I'm trying to explore and through another character's point of view and through experiences that I won't personally experience, but they will, and sort of maybe come to an understanding or resolution of whatever that emotion, feeling, or idea is. So I always feel like characters are just extensions of myself in a way, things that I like to either kind of work through or see, kind of strive towards as well. So that's something I see when I'm creating characters. I always feel that way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If I were to look back at a lot of the stories, haven't quite made yet, but are working on, a lot of the things I've been working on start to revolve around the idea of who am I, and a lot of times I'll have a character feel as though they are stuck in one place and have to have someone tell them, you don't have to stay here. it is your life and you are free to do what you want. You can go follow your shooting star. Like, you have no obligation to anyone but yourself. And I hadn't thought about it before, but it's like, oh, this was what I was living through with my own experience. There was a lot of trying to please a lot of family members by following certain paths and not being able to do that. Feeling in my own heart that it's like, this wasn't the path I wanted to follow. And only realizing a little later on that all these stories I was coming up with were kind of revolving around this same point of, you can go and explore, and you know, who truly are you? Who do you want to be?
I feel like sometimes I just sit down and write and don't really think about it so I can figure out what I'm feeling, and sometimes I meditate and figure out what I'm feeling so that I can write.
Yeah. So, either as the storyteller or the consumer of stories, I'd like to know, what do you find relatable in others, from others? I find that, you know, all the stories all come from the same emotional core, and there's always something to relate to, because the emotions we feel are all very universal. It's like we all feel happy and sad and disappointed and angry, and all the stories are the same thing, just interpreted different ways. So I'm always interested as to what other people find relatable in certain stories.
Well, like, I write music, and like anything where lyrics are written in some degree of vagueness is always a really helpful thing to get me to relate to something, because like when I'm writing a song, even if it's about a specific scenario or about a specific person or about a specific thing that happened to me, just writing about what I felt and how I felt at the time, and just how everything made me feel and how I processed that, versus just writing about like, I had this crappy day and like that happened, and so like, sure, that's nice, but that didn't happen to them. But everybody's felt sad, everybody's felt happy, everybody's been frustrated or disappointed or something. So yeah, having some degree of vagueness like kind of helps people put themselves into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'll go around and ask, while we're still kind of on the subject of what you find relatable from other creators and storytellers. If anyone has any kind of like favorite medium or media, and just kind of seeing where it's like, do you find yourself reflected in the media, and is that the thing that you find very relatable? Because I can say for myself, like with my own favorite animations of, you know, the Kung Fu Panda trilogy and the How to Train Your Dragon movie, there was just something about these characters having to kind of defy what everyone thought of them and just become the true person they were meant to be. I always found very relatable. Because I think that's always what I want for myself, where it's like, I don't want to live up to the expectations of other people, that I can be anything I want to be.
I think I really appreciate, what was the prompt again, so I can refresh my mind?
You know, just what do you find relatable from other people?
I think something that's like really easy to relate to is music. Even if it doesn't have lyrics, the way that's put together just as a whole, it's really easy to get the emotion that's coming from it and what they were intending to put into it, regardless of what, you know, the actual content of the lyrics. That's important too, but even if it's just instrumental or things like that, I think sound is really easy to get a specific feeling across with, and I think that's what ends up, you know, reaching through to me the easiest and the most impactfully.
Yeah, it's interesting if music could be just a more kind of relatable source of connection, because you're not bombarded by visuals or words, where it is the very clear interpretation of the artist, where it's like, this is exactly what they're doing and thinking. And music has this ability to be more free to interpret, and yeah.
Yeah, I like the ability to like freely interpret it, but I also like when even without, you know, the guidance of words or the guidance of a visual or anything like that, I like when someone can use their music and very specifically put it in a way where you can feel exactly what it is that they're trying to say or
Yeah.
what they mean just from how it feels and how it sounds.
What is it? I really like abstract shows and like fantasy shows and animes and stuff because it's like I feel like if you like remove yourself from like reality, you can still have those emotions, but make like situations that like you can just feel like okay, if anyone was in this situation, like they would probably like relate to how this character is feeling, and I just like really enjoy the different ways like animators represent that. I saw this one show where like I realized after finishing it that like each character represented like the creator's emotions, and I thought that was like pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. One more question to kind of end things off. Do you strive to be unique in your stories, or do you create what you would think others would find relatable? I think especially because of social media and the easy ability of being able to share our stories, but also the pressure of trying to build an audience. When you create, are you trying to create for the audience you have, or do you create solely for yourself? Because sometimes if you were to create solely for yourself, maybe you start to have a disconnect with people trying to consume your stories because you are only speaking from your own experience. I don't know how true that would be, just because even your own experience could be shared with other people and someone else would be able to connect with that. For myself, typically a lot of the stories I have are always coming from a place of, I'm going to create this for me. It does not matter if all the people in the world see it, as long as I make it. As long as I was able to express the idea I had and be able to make it from start to finish. Once it's done, I'm like, the idea is out in the world. I have experienced what I want to experience, and I can move on to the next story and the next part of my own personal growth.
I think it's not inherently wrong for like people who want to like reach out to what people want and things like that. But I think if you are focusing more on what you want and what you feel like creating, I feel like if you stick to that, people who have wanted the thing that you're putting out, they'll be able to find that. And I think it's, in my opinion, a lot more valuable than just trying to, you know, get out what other people want. Because that's helpful and that's like a good thing to be able to do. But I do think that it's really important to be able to put your stuff out there, and people will inevitably in some way find themselves in the point of view that you put out for them.
I think it depends on what storytelling, what role it plays in your life. Is it something that you do to work through something, or are you creating to put food on the table? And depending on what your driving factors are, you might burn out when you get to the point where you're creating so much for others that you've lost yourself in that effort. So I've always tried to write for myself, and it's a bit of an attitude of, well, I enjoy this. This is what what's here for me. If you like it, great. Otherwise, it's planning out there for you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely got to be a balance if, you know, you're planning to just kind of be more of a full-time creator and to just keep creating. That how do you find the balance between being able to create your own personal works and express your own personal emotions and experiences, and then being able to create what would make other people happy? And there's definitely the issue of burnout, and I feel like as storytellers and how we are able to kind of get into this meditative state of being able to experience our emotions through storytelling, burnout's a problem to the point where it's like you are now trapped within your own mind and are unable to express your ideas the way that you are naturally able to express them.
So you said like if you were too specific, there could be a disconnect from the audience. But I find like a lot of times like I already feel disconnected from like most people like emotionally and stuff, and so like I really enjoy writing about like my scenario in a way that I try to like convey in a way that other people can understand, because I don't know, I just find it really interesting and challenging trying to close that disconnect.
So some of like my favorite content creators out there are ones we're touching on this earlier, who generally like do it for themselves. So the ones who have like very genuine interest. So like a lot of like Twitch streamers and YouTubers, for example, like I find that the ones that are the best and the ones that are really good at it, like don't have to put on like a fake persona per se. Like they just get on screen and they are themselves for like 2 hours and then they log off, and they don't have to like pretend like they're someone who they're not. And I feel like that naturally like draws a lot of people in, because people who can be themselves.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question to ask if, as audiences, can we feel that the artist is very genuine to their work? Are they enjoying what they're doing? I find that if you are, then your audience does pick up on that, and they do see the passion that you're putting into something. Even if, maybe you don't get the biggest audience from it, I think the smaller personal connections you get are probably the most important. There have been plenty of days where, for about 2.5 years, I made a little animated series called Wolf and Bear, where every week I would just make a little animation with these characters, Wolf and Bear, and they would just do something, and I'd put a little positive message in there. And there were plenty of times people were like, this is what I needed to hear today. And it was the small little connections. Like, it didn't blow up or anything, but it was just the small things of someone saying like, this really connected with me today, and this is what I needed to hear. It made it all feel worth it, made it trying to make an animation every week feel worth it, and just being able to express an idea. And I find that you don't have to connect with everyone, but being able to connect with those few people and to validate their own feelings, to say it's like, I feel this too, is important. We all, despite all the social connections we have in the world, especially in a time like now, there's a real disconnect where we all really do feel alone. And this is the importance of being able to tell stories and to be able to share them with others and to not hide them away. Those were all the questions and points I have written down. If anyone else would like to chime in with any opinions about storytelling, or even like now share some of the other kinds of stories they like to tell or what mediums they like to use, I think this is the time. Or even share some of the stories you're working on now that we've talked about the importance of why it's important to tell stories.
I actually wanted to ask you this question, but I would love to pose it to everyone. For those individuals who create characters, whose characters take on a life of their own, do you ever disagree with your characters? Because sometimes what is the right choice for your character is not something you would ever do. I mean, that's been my experience. I've on several occasions just gone, what are you doing?
Yeah.
With, kind of mentally disconnecting from the fact that I'm writing this. So I'm wondering if that's something anyone else runs into.
Yeah, I think I definitely create some characters where I'll put them in a situation, they'll react, they'll be like, what are you doing? Like, you idiot. That was the wrong choice. You should have gone left and not right. And but at the end of the day, I always think that they're going to end up at the conclusion of their story, and it's gonna be the choices they made to make the mistakes in the beginning are gonna make it all worth it in the end. And it's like, I want them to trip and fall and make as many mistakes as possible, because then they're going to learn so much at the end.
Yeah, I was gonna say on that, I wouldn't say, I don't know if there's been times where I've disagreed, but there's always been times where I would never do what this character is doing. And for me, that's like, because it's just the opportunity to experience things I would never experience, or act in ways I would never act, or think things I would never think. And it's kind of like there's an exhilaration to it, because it's like an opportunity to be someone else in a way, which is very fascinating, because it's kind of like, it just broadens your point of view to see the world through your character's eyes, and like kind of see experience through that character, grow as that character. It's a fascinating, it's like an exhilarating feeling. So I wouldn't say disagree, but like I would never do about the characters do, because they're a different person.
I think what's also fun and interesting is when you make a character that's like very representative of yourself, or really clearly directly yourself, but they still do things that you would normally do, or things that you aren't exactly sure you would agree with, because it's a nice way of being able to explore the good depth of yourself, like things maybe, what if you were to do this, what if you could do this, things like that. I think that's being able to put yourself in a way into shoes that you're not sure quite fit is like a really valuable thing to do, and really interesting to get a look at and get some insight on yourself in a way.
I guess if anyone else has any questions or topics they'd like to bring up.
I mean, sort of related, but if anyone wants to check out his awesome band, I have 3 stickers.
Yeah, I definitely.
We also have an actual question. Since everybody here is a storyteller and probably is too anxious to talk about their own work, how do you get over, do you experience any anxiety talking about your own work so you don't have to have someone else talk? What do you do?
I mean, this whole time I thought, like, I'm gonna share the stories I've been working. I'm like, no, don't share them.
Like, no one wants to hear about
Yeah,
that.
no one wants to hear about this. I think it's just the practice of putting yourself out there. I don't know if there's any surefire way of not being anxious about, because all the stories do come from a personal emotional place, and to put it out there leaves you vulnerable. You put yourself out on the floor, and then if people say this sucks, then it's like, oh, they hate me, and not they just disliked the story because it didn't personally relate to them, or they just didn't get it. The things we make are perfect.
I think the way I like to go about things is if I really, really care about something and I personally am really invested in it, I want to be able to talk about it with other people. And it's nice that there's even a chance that maybe that they would also care about it too. So whether it's something I like or something I'm making, I think just thinking about it in the way of, I care about this a lot and I want people to know that, I think that helps me just say whatever and talk about whatever.
Yeah, and I think something I've kind of learned just because I make things in a visual medium is that people don't always tend to care that much about the visuals as long as you have a good story. I remember making my animated film for Furry Film Fest, Magic Moment, and I animated in 2 weeks, not a lot of time. I wasn't a fan of how the animation came out, but everyone made comments. It's like, oh, I really love the story. It was just a little, like, gay dog's proposal story, and a lot of people really liked it. And they're like, oh, we never get fun stories like this with gay characters. I was like, oh, it didn't even cross my mind. I was just trying to follow the theme. I was just trying to make something from start to finish. And no one cared about any little mistakes that were in the work. No one wanted to point out, like, God, these designs don't look good. It's like, ew, those backgrounds look kind of gross. It's like, oh, I see that animation error at, like, 142. But everyone just related to the story, because the story came from a place of, it's like, what would be just like a really hard journey for a character to try and propose to his boyfriend, and everything goes wrong, and then everything goes right at the end.
It's also like people still like watching old Warrior Cats AMVs from 2008.
Yeah. We'll definitely do a lot of watch parties with friends and Warrior Cat videos. Yeah, well, thank you all for coming to this panel. It's definitely going to get better in the future, so thank you for being kind of a test audience for a little bit of a dry run. I hope you all come back. I'm always looking for people to be kind of like special guests on the panel and really be able to showcase their work and being able to kind of promote themselves and being able to talk about their work in more detail. Thank you so much for coming.